the True Life Teen Podcast, where teens from St. Joan of Arc Church in Powell, Ohio, are exploring the teachings of Blessed John Paul II's theology of the body.
Welcome back. Welcome back to our True Life podcast. Yes. And before we went to the break, we were talking a little bit about some of these suggestions that Jason Everett had about lines that can kind of be drawn. And we really need to hear more from a teen at this point, So Anna, what about like the idea of not splitting off and sitting off by yourself somewhere with your boyfriend or girlfriend, or not going to like dark places or whatever,
Well, of course, I won't do anything with my boyfriend. I won't sneak off or lay down and take a nap with them or anything like that. But then I think the hardest part is thinking about reality and thinking about what's actually going on, and think about a lot of the guys I know that maybe one day I might end up dating, being well, I don't think that's in my mind, I don't think it's hard to see that being actually practical and being how reality goes. So I think this day and age, with everything you see with sex on TV and stuff, it's made it a lot what it shouldn't be. And so being told this is mind-blowing when really it's a simple concept.
Well, you're human, and especially as teenagers you have hormones, and when you first like somebody, you want to be together. You want to spend time with each other. You want to go off and get to know each other, right? So I think that's the hardest things, are trying to avoid, you have to have restraint, and you have to avoid temptation. And in order to do that, you need to kind of think to the next step. If I go off and walk off with this person and try to get to know them, and we're talking deeply, what are some of the things? If we're kissing and it turns into making out, what are some of the other things that are going to be to cross that line and you're going to go too far? So I think these are the things you have to constantly think forward. What is my goal? My goal is to stay pure, to make sure that I'm true to myself and I'm true to this relationship, and try to avoid things that are going to be spontaneous.
And you can find out a lot of things about somebody before getting sexual with them, you know what I mean? It's I think Jason Everett, or maybe it was Mary Beth Bonacci, talks about if you had a ladder of a relationship, that sex is the top rung of the ladder after you're married, and a lot of people want to go from the first rung on the ladder to the top rung on the ladder without going through those steps in between. You don't know each other, you don't know that much about each other, you don't know how you react to different things under stress, under good times, all the stuff that kind of comes with being married or whatever, and having that guarantee that you're going to do everything you can to stay together. It's not there. So you just want to go from this one thing here and jump all the way up to the top rung. And that's not really giving yourself or the relationship a chance. So you kind of have to start in the beginning, when you have the beginning of a relationship, and draw the lines then, and kind of make agreements with each other together. We're not going to do this, we're not going to do that, And it takes really mature people, really mature teenagers or adults, to kind of say, we have to tell each other to stop when we have to tell each other to stop. Because the natural inclinations are a good and holy thing, but again, they're made for marriage. And if you don't have that guarantee and that promise of the sanctity of marriage, you're more likely to end up in some sort of bad situation. And that can be, relationships that are ripped apart and brought back together, and ripped apart and brought back together. It can be sexually transmitted diseases. It can be, pregnancies outside of marriage, and God forbid, abortion. So you have to really set the lines up beforehand and say, I respect you enough as a person that I don't want to do anything that's going to cause you a rift with God or with the church or with your family. And I want the same thing from you. I want to have the same guarantees that we're going to try to respect each other on those lines, and not push the natural lines that might be there.
For me, I know one thing, I have had a couple of times where I've been close to having a relationship, and I know that for those first couple of times I've been before I've even thought about being in a relationship, I made a promise to myself, and I made it a commitment with myself that I will be pure, and I won't have sex, and I won't go past what I think is wrong, and I think making that commitment within yourself, even before you set the boundaries with whoever you're going with, is important. Because if you're just kind of I'll do whatever, you'll do whatever. If you stand for nothing, if you stand for anything, you'll fall for anything.
Yeah, and if you make those lines or whatever, those agreements with yourself, and you bring God into the situation, I think that really helps. Have Jesus as your mentor in this, and Mary and Saint Joseph and their intercessory prayers for chastity, to be able to kind of say, I know that there's natural things going on with me. There's natural hormones racing through my body and through my boyfriend or girlfriend's body too, and I don't want to accidentally trip those things off. So, Lord, as we go out on this date tonight or whatever, help us to, just make sure we don't do anything that we shouldn't be doing. Be with us on the trip. Just those kinds of things, and being aware of the fact that Jesus is the third person that's always with you. Whether or not you're with a whole group or just by yourselves with just the two of you, that Jesus is there too. And then maybe by doing that, you can kind of keep the mindset that this is always supposed to be before God. I wouldn't do anything with the person that I wouldn't do with Jesus sitting right here next to me watching us. And that might, draw some good lines for you as well.
And I also think it's important, for the guys, keep your guy friends. Go out and do your guy things with your boys. Girls, keep your girlfriends. And you can't, when you get to the point where you start seeing yourself isolating yourselves with just each other, and you start seeing your friends kind of dwindle away, and you're asking why, or maybe you're arguing with your friends about the relationship, those are indicators to pay attention. They're seeing something that is not good for you. Maybe you're changing and they don't like it. So these are all things, I think, trying to keep your natural relationships, your good friendships, really, really innocent and have fun. And when it starts getting to that, you're doing more arguing with yourself or not feeling good, you kind of, get to know that's your moment where you say, okay, something's wrong.
Don't mistake codependence for love. Because too much of what we see today is codependence. It's all about getting back to that other person and being with them and being on them and being intertwined together. And you have to grow as a person, and you have to know who you are and mature as a person first before you can share that with other people. You have to know what love is before you can share love. And the church talks about love is giving. Jesus ultimately gave everything out of love for us, So if love is all about self-donation and giving, it's not about taking. If the relationship feels like you're constantly being taken from or taken for a ride or asked of or guilted into or something, then it's probably not of God, And if it's something where you feel like you're freely giving and you're freely giving the things that are good and good is coming from it, not just, staying out of the sexual realm, but just in the other aspects of maturity. Are you helping the other person get through a class? Are you helping them get through an emotional situation, maybe where a family member died or something like that? Are you a good friend for them? Or are you saying, here, let's get rid of the pain by drinking or using drugs or something? Those are the ways that you can kind of judge which direction you're taking the relationship. But all those things kind of feed into what the church wants for you to have a good relationship, to be a good friend, to be a good boyfriend, girlfriend, and ultimately to be a good husband or wife, because the goal is that the church is the bride of Christ, and ultimately each one of us is a spouse of the Holy Spirit. So there will be a revelation someday, and there will be a marriage between the bridegroom and the bride, and we're all part of that as the bride of Christ. So we have to make sure that our robes and such are washed in the blood of the Lamb, that we go to confession if we've made mistakes, we ask for second virginity, and that we move toward the types of relationships in this life that will show us what the real situation is going to be when we're with God someday for all eternity. And it's all about giving and not being selfish, but being selfless. So that's kind of, we're kind of running out of time for our podcast here, but final thoughts from any of you guys?
Final thought for me is it worth it?
Is it worth it? Any final thoughts from you guys?
I think one of the things that I want to say is, if you are either in a relationship and you're on the right road and you're not doing these things, or even if you're like me and have it, I know one of the things I was like had experience is getting laughed at for not being kissed and not like doing these stuff. And at first I'm like, I felt bad. I'm like, yeah. But then I'm like, why should I care? Like, I'm saving myself. I'm doing what's right for me. So don't let it bug you if people are like telling you you should be doing more, because you're on the right road. You
That's
know
right.
what to do.
Someday you're going to make a great girlfriend and a great wife, hopefully someday.
Or boyfriend.
And a great spouse of the Holy Spirit, like we're all supposed to be. All right. Well, we'll see you next week then when we do our next podcast. And if you have questions, go ahead and send them to us. You can send them to our email, which is on the screen right now, and we'll try to answer the questions for you. All right. Talk to you later.
Take care. God bless.
God bless. Take care.
That was awesome.
Hasta la vista.